Ford is the largest American automaker and has investments in numerous other automakers. The corporate headquarters are in Dearborn, Michigan, near Detroit, USA. During the spring and summer of 1903, the company was formally under control and put into operation. The company was founded by Henry Ford. This video is all about the history of the old Mustang with the Tom Ford logo, with its color and logo on the floor mats, brands, and cars. Let's begin with the Mustang Ford logo. Mustang aficionados all across the world adore the Mustang Ford logo. It is recognizable everywhere. However, very few people are aware of the origins of one of the most well-known badges in sports car history. At the same time, few people understand how a running horse inspired Philip Thomas Clark to create the Mustang emblem. The Mustang logo represents a Ford Group car brand. The first car bearing the label came into existence in 1964. Mustang has manufactured almost 10 million vehicles since its inception. Ford came up with the concept for a sports car in 1962. Later in 1964, the car was introduced, and the production line began 1 year later. Philip Thomas Clark, then 27 years old, had to create an automobile logo. He used to work for GMC but left to join Ford. He was ecstatic about the fresh notion that was about to take place. It was to be one of the world's most powerful and attractive automobiles. After 100 days of intense designer work, the pony image appeared. The badge was redesigned and updated multiple times before it was initially introduced. Clark was well known for his animal sketches. He created some drawings for neighborhood cafes and other businesses. But this time, he had to make something that fit the name of the new model and showed how American it was. When Ford introduced the Mustang brand for the first time in 1964, it was to be a young, luxurious, and inexpensive sports car. The Ford Mustang has become a legend, and people all over the world can instantly recognize its famous logo. The car was called the Cougar before it came out, and the first ones even had a logo of this animal on them. The corporation, however, opted to change its name. Allegro, Torino, and Avanti were among the many alternatives available. Finally, the brand had become more recognizable after the fighter plane, the P-51 Mustang, than after the horse. Ford took its time coming up with the right name and logo for the brand, but once it did, the Mustang emblem stuck to the car and hasn't changed much since. In 1964, one of the most recognizable automotive badges was designed. Phil Clark created the iconic running horse, which has only been significantly updated over the years. The horse is galloping rather than running in the 1964 version of the logo, and its head and neck are horizontal. Later, it transforms into the familiar running horse. Over time, the insignia became sharper and more wild, and the silhouette's lines became more clear and easy to recognize. The Mustang emblem took approximately a year to design since the brand couldn't settle on how the horse should look or which way it should face. However, there are several theories as to why the iconic Mustang was painted from right to left. The first version claims that it was done because the artist was right-handed and it was simply easier for him to draw a horse galloping that way, while the second version claims that it represents the car's free spirit by depicting the horse racing in the opposite direction as others. Another explanation is that it was done by mistake when converting from the original drawing. No matter what the reason is, the running pony on the Ford Mustang is an iconic symbol that shows how the company values speed, freedom, and style. The silver color of the Mustang symbol is a great way to show how strong and powerful the brand is. The classic red color of Mustang cars makes a great background for the placement of the symbol, making it look even more classy and expensive. The bright and stylish silver emblem gives the company a sense of professionalism and authority. When put on red, however, it shows excitement for speed and freedom. Some components were added to the Mustang logo over the years, such as a pink ribbon, for breast cancer awareness, and a tricolor vertical rectangle, for American flag colors, but the base of the logo is minimalist and simple, which is why it appears right and attractive on any background. Now, let's go through the Tom Ford logo. Tom Ford SA, also written as Tom Ford, is a high-end fashion house that designer Tom Ford started in 2005. Its collection includes ready-to-wear and made-to-measure items, as well as footwear, accessories, and purses. Estée Lauder licenses Tom Ford's name and logo for Tom Ford Beauty, which sells cosmetics and fragrances, and Marcolin Group for eyeglasses. The designer and filmmaker's full name is Thomas Carlyle Ford. Born in Austin, Texas, he spent his childhood in the Houston suburbs and San Marcos, Texas, just outside of Austin. Ford dropped out of Bard College in Simon's Rock, where he had started at age 16, and went to New York City to attend New York University. He later studied interior design at Parsons, the New School for Design. Despite spending his final year studying fashion, he graduated with a degree in architecture. Tom Ford was the creative director at Gucci and Yves Saint Laurent before he started his own brand or logo. In addition to a thriving fashion career, Ford is also a filmmaker. He directed the films A Single Man in 2009 and Nocturnal Animals in 2016. Both of these films received Academy Award nominations. Moving on to the history of the Tom Ford logo. The former logo was designed in 2005. Like the current one, it included the designer's name. It was written in Arial font, a very popular sans serif typeface and set of computer fonts that come with all versions of Microsoft Windows and Apple's Mac OS. The letters of the wordmark were separated by a reasonable amount of space. While this design achieved its goal, presenting the brand's name in a properly clear manner, it was neither unique nor memorable. This could have been one of the factors that made the corporation to go for a somewhat revised look. In 2011, the logo was redesigned. Once again, the brand's design team chose a basic, completely practical sans serif typeface. This time, it looks like it's the same type and then the letters are about the same size, but their placement seems to be different from the last one. The spacing between the characters has shrunk significantly. The color palette of the Tom Ford emblem is essentially the same as that of the majority of fashion brands, black and white. This is a good method because it does not limit the number of backdrops other than white that can be used without changing the color of the logo. What makes Tom Ford's logo stand out is that it is often dominated by black, since black is often used as the background color instead of white. Let us also discuss the Ford logo. The initial Ford Motor Company emblem was the most complicated. This vintage Ford emblem featured the words Ford Motor Company as well as Detroit, Mich to highlight where the brand originated. An intricate frame of leaves and whirling swirls surrounded the phrases, which were written in a curvy sans serif typeface. This initial Ford logo design was frequently seen in black with a white frame and white lettering. The letters were also made to move like waves, which made them look like they were written by hand. Ford is the flagship brand of Ford Motor Company, the second biggest manufacturer in the United States and one of the world's largest family businesses. Her cars are sold practically everywhere, and they can be found driving throughout towns, off-road, and on racetracks. The manufacturer produces automobiles that run on alternative fuels in addition to those with gasoline engines. Even though it's hard to understand now, the old Ford logo was classy, elegant, and common at the time. Ford is one of the best-known brands in the automotive business, with one of the world's most famous logos. And, like the company, the logo is rich in significance and history. In the following paragraphs, we'll look at the history of the Ford logo, its evolution, design aspects, and then the history of the Ford Motor Company. Initially, the Organization for Vehicle Manufacturing appeared a few years before the recognized date. Cadillac Motor Company was founded in November 1901. However, The founder left it a year later, along with the right to this trademark. As a result, 12 investors formed a new firm, and in the late autumn of 1903, she quickly had her emblem. When Henry Ford created the Ford Motor Company in 1903, the logo design was far from the blue Ford insignia seen today. It was green, and it wasn't reproduced in the unique typeface you see today. In fact, the first Ford logo was a lot more complicated than it is now. It had a lot more text and an embroidered edge. Even though it wasn't on the first Ford Model A, the famous Ford logo was used a lot in business correspondence. A common myth says that Henry Ford designed the Ford emblem, but it was actually made by Childe Harold Willis, who was the company's first head engineer and designer. In 1907, the Ford inscription first appeared on the famed Ford logo. Since then, it has been in every version of the Ford logo, though the wording has changed a little bit each time. 24 years after Ford's founding, the business changed its logo to the one it uses today. Since 1927, the brand has had 3 official logo variants, all of which are quite similar to the current design. Minor adjustments have been made to all of them, such as changing the Ford lettering and making the oval a little rounder. When the first logo was made in 1903, it was a vivid representation of its era. It resembled a spherical badge with a flowery pattern of stems and leaves. The abbreviated brand name was in the center, in the diagonal oval. The first row had the word combination Ford Motor, the second had Co., the third has Detroit, and the fourth has Michigan. Wavy lines were used. The corporation opted to replace the vintage insignia with a modern one in 1907. As a result, the leaves, stems, and curls have vanished, and it now has the shape of an eye or a rugby ball. Several inscriptions can be found on the oval form. The biggest one is in the middle. The word Ford is written with irregular letters, the central ones are enormous, while the side ones are little. The background became gray for the first time, while the color appeared on the logo for the first time. Childe Harold Willis is the designer behind this rendition of the logo. The auto industry came out with a new logo in 1909, which became the basis for all future versions. It is only one inscription, a single handwritten stroke. The word Ford is written in italics to make it look like handwriting, and it is surrounded by quotation marks that look like 2 dots that have been joined together. It has a long tail that goes from the D to the bottom line and is decorated with curls and rounded shapes. In 1911, the designers were inspired by Henry Ford's unique signature. They put it in a horizontal oval with 2 lines around it, one thick, white, and one thin, black. And the developers have inserted the terms "the famous," above, and motor cars around them, below. After a major change, the car company got a brand new logo in the shape of a flying bird that looked a lot like a coat of arms in 1912. Her tail is long, and her wings are extended. The symbol is blue and bears the original signature, along with the slogan "The Universal Car." By 1917, Ford had been using a simpler version of the logo for 10 years. It merely has the name, the founder's signature, and an oval encircled by a thin black stripe. The inside backdrop is a delicate lilac color. The hue of the background grew by several tones and became a rich purple by 1927. There is also double edging. White is used for the text and lines. However, with the 1949 versions, a separate logo, the coat of arms, was utilized. The 1957 version of the Ford symbol has been redesigned as a curled oval with a bulging middle and tapered ends. A dark purple replaces a vibrant purple. The letters have been changed a bit, the strokes are longer, and the letters themselves are rounder. Another revision came up in 1961 that included a new typeface style, flattened and stretched. This is due to the oval being narrower and more conventional, with no nubs. The purple tint was replaced with a dark blue by the designers. They also put in dual pipework. In 1965, the brand name got a whole new look. It is now an ellipse with a white outline, which looks a lot like the logo from 1927. And an italic font that is tall and stylish. By 1976, the Ford logo had changed into a dark cobalt design with highlights, a gradient, and a chrome border. Now, the border is wide and silver with shadows. In 2003, the oval badge was updated for the centennial. The new design was created by the Pantone studio. She got rid of the large silver border, replaced the metallic texture with a blue gradient, and added a 3D effect. However, in 2017, the corporation returned to its original 1965 2D logo. Simultaneously, the 2003 version has not fully vanished, certain models still have it within. Let's have a look at the history of the Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company, or just Ford, is an American car company that was started by Henry Ford and 11 other investors in 1903. In 1919, the company was reincorporated, with Henry Ford's family assuming complete ownership. Before 1956, when the first common shares were given to the public, the only stockholders were Henry Ford, his wife, his son, their heirs, and the Ford Foundation. The car company, which is based in Dearborn, Michigan, makes cars, tractors, trucks, and parts and accessories for cars. In 1896, Henry Ford built his first experimental car in Detroit, Michigan. The first car was manufactured in July 1903, following the formation of the Ford Motor Company. The immensely successful Ford Model T was revealed 5 years later. This car was so popular that Ford had to come up with new ways to make a lot of them. Henry Ford opened Ford's first American branch assembly plant in Kansas City in 1911. In Manchester, England, he opened Ford's first international production plant. 2 years later, Henry Ford introduced the world's first moving assembly line. In order to boost labor productivity even further, he instituted a daily wage of $5 for an 8-hour workday, instead of $2.34 for a 9-hour workday, in 1914. Ford built its first overseas sales branch in Paris in 1908. By mid-1914, there were over 500,000 Ford Model T vehicles on the world's roads. By 1923, Ford was producing more than half of all automobiles in the United States. At the end of the 1920s, there were assembly plants in South America, Europe, Canada, Asia, Australia, and South Africa. Ford rose to become the world's most popular automobile manufacturer. The first new Ford Model A and the last Model T were produced in 1927, followed by the first V8 in 1932. In 1922, Ford bought the Lincoln Motor Corporation, which had been started in 1917, to make its first high-end Continentals and Lincolns. Ford debuted the first Mercury, a mid-priced automobile, in 1938. Henry Ford held 58.5% of Ford by 1906, when the other shareholders objected to the notion of building the costly and massive River Rouge production factory in Dearborn, Detroit. Henry bought them out. Edsel Ford, his son, was elected president in 1909. Edsel died in 1943, and Henry Ford took over the presidency. Henry Ford II, his grandson, took over as president of the company 2 years later and fixed the way it handled money. He also helped strengthen the company's culture by hiring smart young leaders. Among these accomplishments was the failed implementation of the Edsel design. From 1945 to 1970, Henry Ford II was the company's CEO, and from 1960 to 1980, he led the board of directors. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Ford began to diversify, albeit on a small scale. However, by the 1990s, the company's concentration had switched to automobiles and financial services. In 1989, the business purchased Jaguar, a luxury vehicle manufacturer in the United Kingdom. Aston Martin has been a wholly owned subsidiary since 1993. In later years, they bought the Hertz Corporation in 1994, the car division of Volvo in 1999, and Land Rover SUVs in 2000. Ford also purchased a significant stake in Mazda. However, as Ford's fortunes began to fall in the early 2000s, it began to sell off these trademarks. Hertz went out of business in 2005, and Aston Martin went out of business in 2007. Ford began selling its Mazda stock in 2008 and totally divested it in 2015. In December 2008, President George W. Bush said that Ford, General Motors Corporation, and Chrysler LLC, the big three automakers, would get an emergency financial rescue package to save the country's struggling auto industry. The loans would keep the automakers in business until at least March 2009, when they would have to demonstrate their financial sustainability or return the monies. An additional requirement required the firms to undergo reorganization. The funds were first made available to Chrysler and General Motors. Ford apparently had enough money to stay afloat and did not require government assistance at the moment. Ford was able to avoid bankruptcy, which Chrysler and General Motors both filed for, and improve market share and sales in 2009. The federal government's Cash for Clunkers program, which gave customers up to $4,500 to assist them trade in older vehicles for brand new fuel-efficient models, contributed to the success. Furthermore, Ford prioritized stronger vehicle brands and implemented a number of cost-cutting measures. Volvo was sold to Zhejiang Geely Holding, a Chinese corporation, in 2010. Months later, Ford announced that it would discontinue production of the Mercury brand. However, as sales fell, the automaker attempted to diversify its offerings. Ford Smart Mobility was launched in 2016 to make, among other things, self-driving cars and businesses that share cars. Ford revealed the Ford logo to expand its electrified vehicle lineup a year later. However, beginning in 2018, the business began phasing out all of its passenger cars, with the exception of the Ford Focus Active and Mustang. Instead, the automaker planned to focus on sports utility vehicles, crossover cars, and pickup trucks. The Ford logo on the floor mats of their cars, on the other hand, shows that automakers haven't been left behind in the customization race. Major automobile floor mat manufacturers have discovered a way to add a more personal touch to their floor mats. From logos, initials, phrases, and names to quality edge binding, we can do it all. Unfortunately, most floor mat companies do not offer vehicle-specific logos, and you may have to comb through a lot of them to locate the ones that do. In terms of the color of the logo, even though there was only one basic part to the Ford logo, it went from a complicated structure to a complicated symbol. The designers concentrated on textures, colors, highlights, shadows, and transitions between them. They've also experimented with gradients in recent editions. The company chose a bespoke typeface based on Henry Ford's signature for its logo. As a result, the text is italicized and handwritten. The brand palette is diverse. It includes purple and blue in a range of tones, from light to dark. Gray is also available in metallic, silver, and chrome.